For a gay, Jewish, conservative-leaning Canadian, finding a political home took some doing. Fred Litwin chronicles his experience in a new book. It's called Conservative Confidential, Inside the Fabulous Blue Tent. And Fred Litwin joins us now for more. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you. Thank you very much.
Well, this book came out before the last federal election took place.
Yes.
So I got to ask you first off the top here. After Conservatives are now out of power for the first time in a decade, what is it like to be a Conservative in Canada right now?
Well, it's a bit disorienting, but it's actually quite good, you know, because now I think it's time for Conservatives, small c and I hope big C, to think back and think about what is in store for the future. It's a time to take stock and come out with some ideas and philosophy, and think about what it means to be a Conservative in Canada. And I hope that the party and other Conservatives do that.
Did you vote?
I did vote, of course.
For whom did you vote?
Well, I have to say that I didn't vote for anybody. I actually took my ballot and just put it in the ballot box empty.
How come?
I obviously couldn't vote for the Conservatives, and I really couldn't vote for Justin, and there was no way I was going to vote for Thomas Mulcair. I thought we had a very, very poor choice of leaders in this election.
Elizabeth May not an option for you?
No, definitely not.
You say, I couldn't vote Conservative, of course.
Yep.
Like it's so obvious why a Conservative couldn't vote Conservative. Okay, that's not going to be obvious to a lot of people, so how come you couldn't do it?
It was a combination of the fact that this government had become extremely arrogant. Arrogant in the way they treated Parliament, arrogant in the way they treated the committee system, arrogant in the way they treated anybody who differed in opinion. And in fact, when it came to ideas and philosophy, they were completely empty. There were no big ideas, no great philosophy, no big initiatives. So they were empty there. And so in a sense, they were timid. At the same time, they were arrogant. So they were arrogantly timid.
That was, now I've heard lots of criticism about the Conservative Party, as you can imagine, but arrogantly timid is an interesting juxtaposition. How do you get there? Well,
you know, if you look at some of the very, very big, important Conservative items that they might discuss, I mean, for them, of course, you couldn't discuss abortion. You couldn't discuss equalization. You couldn't discuss bilingualism. You couldn't discuss the merit principle.
Capital punishment.
You couldn't discuss that. You couldn't discuss even the farm marketing boards. I mean, there were a whole bunch of items that were completely off the table on the Conservative side. And of course, the left-wing parties won't discuss it. So the window of what we could discuss in Canada had narrowed.
Harper's position, though, if I understood it on that, was we can't allow ourselves to be dragged down by discussions about things that essentially the Canadian public in its wisdom have, quote-unquote, decided on, because if we do that, we won't actually get a chance to do any of the stuff that we want to do because the media will attack us, the left will attack us, etc. Why don't you find that persuasive?
What did they want to do? I mean, they could have rewritten the tax code. They could have flattened the taxes. They could have ended corporate welfare.
They did cut taxes. Cut a lot of taxes.
They cut taxes. Yes, they cut taxes a bit, but they didn't flatten the tax system. They didn't cut corporate welfare. They didn't take out loopholes. They didn't have and in fact, the problem was they did boutique tax credits. I mean, this is not philosophy. This is
the GST. 2 points on the GST.
GST,
it's a big tax cut.
It's a big tax cut, and you know, okay, thank you very much. But the reality was that they were quite timid in many, many items, and there was no. I wish there was more.
They were. I mean, you're Jewish.
Yep.
They were fabulous on Israel.
They were fabulous on Israel.
So how do you not vote for them just for that alone?
Well, you know, it's great to be. The other parties were very good in Israel as well. So I really appreciate what the Conservatives did on Israel. I do appreciate it. They are very good on Ukraine. But, you know, talk is cheap. When it comes to actually doing something, I felt even on Ukraine, I mean, they sent 200 military people to train the Ukraine military. Couldn't they do more? They wanted to fight ISIS. They sent 6 planes. I wish we had opposition parties that would have said, you know what, we can do better than that. We sent 43 special forces. New Zealand sent more special forces than we did.
So even in the area of the military, which you would think Conservatives ought to be more muscular on.
They ought to be, and of course they didn't do well on procurement, and of course they started to, they didn't spend what they should on the military.
I wonder though if you don't have just a tinge of sympathy for Stephen Harper, because I'm sure you've experienced this wherever you've gone in Canada. There is a Harper derangement syndrome out there.
There is.
Where people just absolutely are out of their mind, insanely furious with the guy because they think he's a dictator and fundamentally anti-democratic. Do you not? I mean, you have some sympathy.
Absolutely, and I write about that in my book. You know, I write about that through the prism of the gay media, where they thought that basically Harper was going to wage a holy war on homos, and they thought that basically this was a Christianist administration hell-bent on enforcing Christian rules. I mean, it was ludicrous. So yes, there was a lot of Harper derangement, and it's really unfortunate that it's there. And I write about it.
How's the new Prime Minister doing, in your view?
Well, I think the tone is really good, and there's some things I really like. For instance, to see the Prime Minister welcoming Syrian refugees and helping them try on winter coats, that's fantastic. Who can say anything bad about that? I really appreciate that. On the other hand, it's still early days. I'd like to see exactly what this government is going to do to fight ISIS. I'd like to see in other areas what this government is going to do. I'm a little worried. I'm not crazy about having the Prime Minister in Vogue magazine. I think there's better uses for his time.
Although he has managed to sort of capture the public, well, what we're told is by doing things like this, the New York Times magazine as well, he's got Canada on the map in an international way, in a way we haven't been in a decade. Is that worth anything?
Well, it's definitely worth something, but I'd like to see the substance. Okay, we have the style down. We know he's going to be good in style. He's going to be great on style, but let's see the substance. And my concern again is that you know, middle class tax cut. I'm not sure that's what we really need to be doing. I don't think those people really need a tax break, a small tax break. But there are people who, working class poor people, who do need help. And I'm worried they're not going to get the help they need.
All right, this gets us actually to where I wanted to go next, which is a bit of a retracing of your political journey, which is really quite fascinating, because you started off, if I can put it this way, as a bit of a lefty.
I was.
Following Noam Chomsky and the like, and you were certainly no fan of Ronald Reagan's when he was President of the United States. And then September 11th, 2001 happened. How did that change your worldview?
In a huge way. I mean, I was watching the planes hit the World Trade Center, the second plane, and I just couldn't believe what had happened. And I was looking for an explanation of who would do this? What kind of monsters would do this sort of crime? What ideology would motivate people to do this? And I was hoping that basically I would find some answers from the left, where I had found many answers in the past. And in fact, the left regurgitated a lot of anti-Americanism. The Americans had it coming, and it was more than disappointing. It was really disillusioning.
Christopher Hitchens was a bit of a soulmate for you because, of course, he agreed with the war in Iraq, and certainly a vigorous attack to countering 9/11.
Yeah, and it wasn't just 9/11, because there was the Intifada against Israel, which had started before 9/11. Restaurants, buses, weddings were being blown up. Then you had the war in Iraq, and it seemed like the whole culture was veering into dementia. And the big problem, I thought, for Canada was, who was the intellectual guru that Canadians turned to? But it was Michael Moore.
Okay, well, I got a quote about that here. You've dedicated your book to Hitchens. Moore is definitely on the other side of your Facebook friend page, let's put it that way. Here's what you say in Conservative Confidential. After 9/11, when many of my friends were questioning the fight of the Taliban in Afghanistan, when so many people were wondering if Osama bin Laden was really behind 9/11, when it seemed that the mere mention of the name George Bush prompted an immediate allergic reaction, and when ridiculous slop called Fahrenheit 9/11 seemed to be in every cinema, it was calming to know that Christopher Hitchens had my back. Okay, we get why you like Hitchens. What's your problem with Michael Moore?
The problem with Michael Moore is he really can't seem to tell the truth about anything. And it started with his first film, Roger and Me, which I loved back in the 80s, which told the story of General Motors and how the town of Flint reacted to massive layoffs. His hometown. His hometown. It was a very, very fascinating documentary. Who could not be touched by seeing all these people laid off and the town trying to do something to come back? But in fact, even in that film, Moore had it backwards. So what the reality was that the layoffs had occurred before the town did all these crazy stunts to get people employed. And he reversed it, and completely dishonest right from the start.
I think he would acknowledge he is a polemicist. I mean, he doesn't set out to tell a neutral documentary, right? He's got a point of view.
Well, that's fine. I have no problem with the point of view, but you don't have to lie about it. I mean, you can have a legitimate point of view and tell the truth. And in fact, he has trouble with that. And you see it in every documentary along the way, from Bowling for Columbine right to Fahrenheit 9/11.
Let's talk about the Middle East situation. Queers Against Israeli Apartheid. This was a group that, you're smiling already, but this was a group that obviously captured a lot of public attention by protesting against Israel, marching in gay pride parades and this kind of thing as well. Let's start from scratch on this one. What was their argument as to why members of the LGBT, do you add the Q or you don't add the Q?
Oh, you know, it depends what day of the week it is. Usually not, but...
All right. For argument's sake, let's just add it for now. What's the argument as to why that community ought to be against Israel?
Well, these were the Queers Against Israeli Apartheid really believed that Palestinians, or they bought into the myth that basically to support the Palestinians. And I support the Palestinians in their quest for a state. But to support the Palestinians, you must oppose the Israelis. And I think it was a fundamental error that they made, and they felt that this would be a rallying cry for the LGBT community, for its parades and for gay people everywhere. And I think it was very unfortunate. You
pointed out to them, obviously, that the irony of their position is that Israel is the only country in the Middle East where you actually can have a pride march.
That's right.
What would their response to that be?
Well, they've come up with a term called pinkwashing. And so pinkwashing is a term which they talk about Israel, where yes, Israel is very, very good on gay rights, but they use that to hide the fact that they're oppressing the Palestinians.
Not the case?
Well, it's missing the point. I wish that more Arab countries would engage in pinkwashing, and that they themselves would also support gay rights in an attempt to mislead the public. The true thing is that gay people are being hung in Iran, and gay people are being thrown off buildings in ISIS, and for several years we had the gay community talking about Israel. And it was a classic misdirection and a real misappropriation of attention, when in fact we do have true areas of oppression for gay people.
What's happened to Queers Against Israeli Apartheid?
Well, they've disbanded. They said they're going to go off to do other things, and I think it was largely because they faced real opposition within the gay community and within the outside community, who were just laughing, I think.
Did you have any? I'm just wondering if you had sort of any doubts about where to plant your flag on that one, in as much as you are in favor of justice for the Palestinians.
That's right. Yes.
You are in favor of gay rights.
Yep.
You are a supporter of Israel.
Yes.
Did you have any difficulty sort of trying to be all three of those things at once when dealing with this organization?
Not really, because I think that I support a Palestinian state, and the only way we're going to get there is by the two sides to reach an agreement, to have a strong, viable Jewish state and a strong, viable Palestinian state. And that's the only solution going forward, two states for two peoples. And when you start talking about boycott, divestment, and sanctions, you're really talking about hurting one side and perhaps trying to go for a one-state solution.
Can I tell you, of course I can, and I'm going to. My favorite revelation about this book is the notion that you found it more difficult to, quote unquote, come out as a conservative in Canada than you did as a gay man in Canada.
Yes.
And I really need to understand how that possibly could be the case.
Well, when I came out as a conservative, and certainly a big C conservative, because I was working in the 2005 and 2006 campaign, I was met with a flood of disbelief.
From whom?
Oh, my personal friends, family. How can you be conservative? You're gay. The two don't go together, and there's this automatic assumption that if you're gay, you must be on the left. And then I found there were bloggers. I started up a blog, and people accused me of a false consciousness, and didn't understand how could I be conservative. And I also got email from a lot of gay people who were quite upset.
Where's the notion that if you are gay, you therefore have to be anti-conservative or pro-progressive? Where does that come from?
Well, I think it comes from the fact that the first people who were out there supporting gay rights were on the left. And that's where it started, and it took, the conservatives came on board for gay rights a little later after people on the left. But what people forget is when you go and look at legalization of homosexuality in 1969, that even on the left there were some voices that we don't want to talk about. Tommy Douglas voted for legalization of homosexuality, but only because he wanted gay people to get the treatment that they deserve in hospitals. And so we forget that. We forget that if you go back and do research in the old body politic, that for years the Ontario NDP were against adding sexual orientation to the Ontario Human Rights Code. And in fact, there was a headline in Body Politic one year saying the NDP meant no damn principles.
Just remind everybody, the Body Politic was a newspaper that came out,
the first big
this was what, 40 years ago maybe?
Yeah, first big gay newspaper in the 70s and 80s.
Right. So, all right, so help us. I mean, I think part of it as well is that a lot of social conservatives who have a home in the Conservative Party of Canada aren't thrilled with homosexuality.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
And therefore, people on the left wonder, how can you possibly have common cause with these folks? So what's the answer?
I've always worked within organizations to help change things. I mean, coming out, the big strategy for gay people was to come out. You came out to your family, you came out at your workplace, and you helped change the way people think about gay people. So why should not people go into the Conservative Party, come out, and get people to change? I did that at Intel Corporation, where I came out and started a gay group within the company. It seemed like a natural thing to do. And as soon as I joined the Conservatives, I was out there talking about this issue. Hey, I'm gay. What do you think about that? Why aren't we reaching out to gay people? We need to do more.
You asked, actually, Senior Cabinet Minister Jason Kenney about that.
That's right.
Because Jason Kenney, of course, was doing outreach with every multicultural group under the sun.
That's right.
So you asked him, how about the gay community? What did he say?
He said, what community is that? And he was like puzzled. And it was a very disappointing answer. That was the 2008 conference in Winnipeg.
In your view, was there anything homophobic about the Harper government?
Well, I think they started off, really not willing to talk to gay people, and so the gay community didn't really want to talk to the Harper government. The two sides were at each other's back, and the Harper government occasionally would do things that certainly, if not homophobic, would give the indication. So when Diana Blonsey gave $400,000 to the Gay Pride Parade, shortly after that, she was removed from that portfolio. Whether that was homophobic, I don't know, but it gave the impression. But over time, the Conservative Party or the Conservative government changed, and they started to do some outreach to the gay community. They started to aggressively take in gay refugees from countries around the world. They started talking about gay rights. Even Stephen Harper was talking about gay rights in Uganda at various Commonwealth meetings. John Baird was very active on the file.
Well, I was going to ask about that. I mean, Baird, at the beginning of his political carear, was in the closet. He's pretty out of the closet now about his sexual orientation. Do you think that was his influence at play there?
I think Jason had a big influence on that. Jason had a change of heart and wanted to reach out. I think John certainly did. So both of them. And I think John had a very big influence on the Prime Minister, or on Harper. And even at the UN, Canada was actually lobbying to change the criteria for refugees to include sexual orientation. Now, people don't know this. I got the stats for refugees. Under the Conservative government, over 4,000 refugees came here on the basis of same-sex orientation.
Jason Kenney was a senior cabinet minister in the Harper government. I guess he's thinking about right now whether or not he wants to replace Stephen Harper. He's a single man in his 50s, very devout Catholic. You kind of skate around in the book discussing whatever his sexual orientation is, and I don't know what it is, and I don't know if you know what it is.
I don't know what it is. No, I don't.
So why go there?
I only went there because he was asked that by Capital Extra. It was
What's Capital Extra?
Capital Extra was the gay newspaper of Ottawa, and what was amazing was that Jason had reached out with an email to gay people saying, "I'm bringing in refugees from Iran, gay refugees from Iran. We'd like you to join us and help us and sponsor gay refugees." And the reaction from the gay community was, "How did you get our email? Why are you sending us email? This is horrible." And in fact, he was only sending email to people who had already contacted his office. So he had to call up the newspaper to sort of make sure that they were okay with it. And of course, while he's on the phone, they have to ask him, "Are you gay?" And he said, well, he wouldn't answer it. He doesn't discuss personal issues.
That's a fair answer.
Absolutely.
It's nobody's business.
Absolutely.
Okay, I wonder whether there, as part of your agenda going forward, they've had these log cabin Republicans, I think it's called, in the United States, members of the gay community who are conservative and who've tried to, in the past, raise money and be involved with the Republican Party. Once upon a time, had their donations refused because some Republican candidates didn't want them. But do we need something like that in Canada?
Well, I tried to start a group like that called Gay Dominion several years ago and just found I didn't have the energy to really move it forward. I don't think we need it right now because, we have all our rights, we have all our freedoms. Gay people are out there doing things, or doing things within the Conservative Party and other parties. I don't think we actually need a gay movement like that. Although I should say we do have a party that I run with a couple of friends at each Conservative conference called the Fabulous Blue Tent. and that's for gay conservatives and our friends.
That's a great expression. Who came up with that? The fabulous blue tent.
Well, my friend Jamie Ellerton came up with the idea for a party, and we brainstormed, and we thought, well, you know, conservatives are a blue tent, so it has to be fabulous.
Okay, let's come full circle here, and I want to finish off sort of where we started, and that is you say that now that the conservatives are in opposition, as is traditionally the case when you're in opposition, it's a good time to sort of rethink where you are, what you stand for, what you want to be. So what are the handful of principles you think the Conservative Party ought to be pursuing as it looks ahead?
I think first off, I think a little dose of libertarianism could really do them well. I think they should take a strong stand against the nanny state and be a little more libertarian in a whole variety of policies on markets and economics.
How about if women want to wear burqas when they're sworn in as citizens and the government ought not to be telling them what to wear?
That's a tough issue.
Does your libertarianism extend that far?
That's a tough one because I actually am a little uncomfortable about women wearing burqas at citizenship ceremonies, largely because I'm not sure whether that's a real requirement of Islam. I just think it's a bit unseemly, but that's a personal opinion. It's not a major priority because so few women do wear burqas. I think they should focus elsewhere.
Like what?
Well, you know, I think that they should, first off, strong foreign policy, and I think a real commitment for democracy and freedom worldwide. We could do a lot more. At one point, the Conservatives talked about a democracy promotion agency. Let's do it. Let's go out there and you know, the Americans are retreating in many ways. I think we can go and fill some of the gap. We can never be the United States, but we can go out there, lobby the Americans and NATO for strong commitments and working in places like Syria and other hot zones.
How about China?
Absolutely, in China.
You want to promote democracy in China?
Absolutely. We should be out there and we should be opposing what the Chinese government is doing by arresting journalists and bloggers. We should have a strong voice, a strong commitment to upholding freedom and liberty.
Do you, at the moment, see a champion for these positions?
I don't know. I'm hoping Jason Kenney will step up because I know that he really is interested in China and some of the other areas that are oppressed around the world. So I'm hoping he'll step up, but we'll have to see.
So there's no candidate at the moment that you got your eyes on?
Only Jason, but we'll see. You know?
Have you talked to him about it?
I have not talked to him about it.
Don't you think you should?
Well, you know, I'm waiting for the right moment when I see him. I just saw him last week at a fundraiser. I gave him a copy of my book, so I want to make sure he has a chance to read it, and then we'll have a chat.
Okay. You know, probably two schools of thought on this. Number one, that the new Liberal government has come in with, you know, with such a change of tone and sunny ways in the whole thing, that the Conservatives could be in opposition for quite some time.
Yep, quite possibly.
Or, you know, we remember Justin Trudeau's father coming in on a similar wave of excitement, and 4 years later he almost lost. I guess the question is, how deep in the wilderness do you think your party is right now?
It's very deep. It's incredibly deep, and I don't know whether they realize how deep in the wilderness they are. And I hope that they avoid the mistake that I thought the Liberals did by not really rethinking who they are and what they stand for, but going for a shiny new leader. Let's really take the time and do the hard work and come up with ideas that will challenge and excite the Canadian population. I also think that, you know, maybe it's not so bad being in opposition. I mean, if every day and every week you can get a jab in at the government, a jab here with some philosophy, some really interesting positions, you could influence the government. You know, if you focus on things like China, you can get people on your side. People can understand some of these arguments. And I think being in opposition is a good chance to give you the freedom to say things that you might otherwise be scared of in office.
And just finally, in our last minute, how comfortable are you as a gay man in Canada in 2016?
I'm incredibly comfortable. I mean, what an amazing country. I mean, we've come so far. We've got all the rights we want. In fact, I dare say the gay project is finished. We now can go into our communities and do what we want, live where we want, work at any corporation, government office, be who we are, and it's up to us now to go and achieve.
See, it's answers like that that make the progressives crazy. You know that, eh?
Absolutely.
You know that.
I know.
Because they think you're just dreaming in Technicolor on that.
Yep. Well, they may think that, but I'm not. And they know it. They really know it.
The name of the book is Conservative Confidential, Inside the Fabulous Blue Tent. Fred Litwin's been our guest. Thanks so much, Fred.
Thank you very much.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit supporttvo.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.